You're watching PowerNation. On this episode of Carcass, our Datsun undergoes a huge transformation. We'll hack up our fenders so we can add some flares, plus bolt on a set of fender mirrors and give our 280Z a true JDM feel.
Then we head down to the paint booth for some bodywork tech and a total color revision. Hey everyone, welcome back to Carcass. Jeremy and I have been making some good headway on our 1978 280Z, and this car came to us bone stock, so even with the little bit of work we've done to it so far, it's quite a bit different. And if you haven't seen what we've done, here's a quick rundown and also what we have planned next.
After a quick test drive, we got to work by pulling the engine and trans out so we could give the L28 a quick refresh and make the swap to the CD009 6-speed manual. Tackling the suspension started with us removing all parts from the front and the rear of the Datsun. Our Apex suspension setup was bolted in along with an upgraded diff from a newer 370Z. We followed that up with a set of BC coilovers. More 370 parts came into play with a full set of 14-inch rotors, 4 piston calipers in the front, and dual piston calipers in the rear. Some 17x9 Roto wheels and Continental's ExtremeContact forced tires took care of filling out the wheel wells. Up next on the list of things to do will be some body mods, including a set of fender flares, removing the crash bumpers and swapping them out for a sleeker set, and adding a pair of fender mirrors. We'll finish the project off by painting our Datsun Boulder Gray, which is a color you can find on the newly released Z. So as you guys can see, we have the engine and transmission in the car that's simulating all the weight we need to compress the suspension, because this is the ride height that Jimmy and I are shooting for. You can see there's not a lot of room between the tire and the fender, so we're going to be cutting this out and running a ZG style fender flare. Now this is as close as you can get to the JDM style fender flare that came on this S30 chassis. Now Jimmy and I have done a couple mock-ups and we've looked for a good spot to put these, and it's entirely up to your discretion. And we think we're gonna run it up this high. I don't think so, no. We're actually gonna run it low. Again, you can put it wherever you want. All we're looking to do here is give us that JDM look, get the flare on it, and give us some clearance so the tires don't run into the fenders. Now, the idea here is to drill a couple of holes. We're going to use these cool Cleco clamps. This is just going to hold everything in place so we don't have to continuously bolt it on and unbolt it. So we're going to mark some holes here. We'll come back, cut the fender, and then we just got to do that 3 more times. You like that?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right.
Clecos are a nice tool to hold together sheet metal panels, or in our case, fiberglass fender flares. They do come in a few different sizes, so you'll have to make sure you use the correct size drill bit. We've got our Clecos in our fender now, so this thing's fitting pretty tight to the body. One hole's a little bit misplaced. We'll have to go back and adjust it for the final installation, but otherwise we can get the car up in the air and start cutting the fender.
So I'm going to trace a line on the inside of the flare on the fender here, and I'll also trace a line on the outside. That way we know exactly where to cut and where our mounting holes are going to be. Get these off of here, lay down some tape, and then we'll start cutting. Okay, so we have the fender cut out for the fender flare, and since we're up here making a mess anyways, we're gonna go ahead and ditch these marker lights. Jimmy and I don't very much care for them. They stick out entirely too far, and we're just going for a more sleeker look with the car. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this. We'll build a little patch panel, and then we'll get it welded into place. Our patch panel will be made out of 16 gauge sheet metal. Once we have the correct shape, we'll stitch weld it into place, making sure not to put too much heat into the panel, causing it to warp. We'll grind the welds down flush and then finish them off with a sanding disc. All right, well, we have the fender flare on the car. It's sitting at ride height, and we took care of the marker light area. We still have a little more work to do. We got to come down here and kind of trim the bottom of the valance so our tires can go to full lock. But for now, I got 3 more corners to take care of.
We ditched the park bench bumpers for a sleeker look and add some more JDM styling cues. So we've got all 4 fender flares mocked up on the car now, and it looks really good. But something to note is that the rear is a little bit different than the front, because when we cut the fender, we not only cut the outside skin, but there's also some inner structure to it as well. So when we put this thing back together, you have to weld the 2 pieces together, and then when we finish the car, we'll go ahead and smear some seam sealer on it to make sure that's watertight. So now moving on with the exterior modifications, we're gonna get rid of the bumpers, and for good reason, because they're pretty ugly. So we've got this really cool carbon fiber piece, and this is basically a 240Z bumper just to make this thing look a little bit more slim. So it's just as easy as getting the old stuff off, getting the new one on. Get this in once, see how it fits.
Inside ones, right?
Yeah, inside bolt.
Trick is not letting the bolt fall through the bumper. There it
Yeah.
goes. I got mine started. All right, got that side in.
Working on it. With the front bumper on the car, this thing definitely has more style than it did before, and even without a bumper on it at all, it looked way better than the stock bumper that was on it. So now, to move forward with the JDM style, we have our fender mount mirrors instead of the door mounted ones, and we have to know where they go. So we've got 2 templates already taped on the fender. There's 2 holes marked, so we'll just center punch these, drill the holes, and then install the mirrors. To make it easy, I'll drill a pilot hole and then use a step drill bit to get the final size. The mirrors are a super easy upgrade that give our car a ton of style.
Stay tuned. We show you some tips on making those body mods as smooth as glass. All right, guys, well, we've made our way down here into the prep booth, and it's time to straighten this car out. We've done a bunch of metal work. We shaved the marker lights. We made the fenders and the quarters quite a bit bigger so we can run our fender flares. Plus, we decided to ditch the rear bumper, so Jimmy did a bunch of metal work back there. So the steps from here are pretty simple. We're gonna prep the areas that are bare metal. We're gonna lay down some mud or some body filler, straighten that all out. Then we'll prep the entire car and get it ready for some high build primer. To make sure our body filler has a good bite, we'll scratch the area up with 36 grit sandpaper. I like to mix my mud heavy because I don't like to wait around before I can start sanding. Applying even pressure with the paddle, I like to make it as straight as possible, even though I'm going to come back later and sand it. This just makes the job go quite a bit faster. To get this straight, we'll first knock it down with 36 grit, and then we'll switch over to 80. All right, guys, well, that feels really good. It took a really nice shape with the fender here. Now, we're not gonna take it any further because we do have to 180 the entire car to get it ready for primer. And when it comes time to doing all of that work, we always like an extra set of hands. So everybody, this is Michael Huxley. He's the newest member of the PowerNation team. You're going to see him all over the 4 shows that we do here at PowerNation. And like I said, an extra set of hands is always good. So he's got a sanding block. I'm going to pick mine up. We're going to get back to work. We're using sanding blocks instead of a DA because the car is already pretty straight. So we're going to use the existing paint to make it just a bit straighter. Working our way around the car will take care of the rest of the bodywork. We're going to make sure that the car is completely sanded with no shiny spots left. Sanding the car will give it the texture for the next step. All right, well, the car is all sanded down and we even masked it off, and Jimmy and Michael are gonna hit this thing with some wax and grease remover, and I'm gonna go mix the high build primer. This 2K primer will fill in any small imperfections, and we'll apply 2 wet coats, giving it ample time to flash between each coat.
All right, Jeremy's got the high build down now, so now we're gonna block it down until it's smooth.
This step is started with a 180 grit to knock down all the high spots off the primer. Using a long sanding block, that will ensure that we keep all the panels as straight as possible. We'll work our way through 180 grit all the way up to 320 before we head into the booth. Well, coming up, after all of our hard work, it's time to put this Datsun in its new color. Well, all right, guys, after hours and hours of body work, we have the Datsun nice and smooth, and we're going to get ready to lay down some color. All right, but before we can get to that step, we do have to lay down some sealer. Now, what sealer does is it gives the car a good solid color, plus it gives us a good chemical bond when we lay down the paint. It's pretty easy to mix up. It's 4 to 1. So we'll get this mixed up here, get it in the gun, then we'll go tack the car off. We'll start spraying. Before we begin, we'll tack the car off to get rid of any leftover dust and lay down one medium coat. The overspray you see on the door gaps is where we already laid down body color in the door jambs. This will just make it easier when we transition into painting.
Jeremy's got the sealer down on the car, so we're ready for some color, and we're going with Boulder Gray, which is a color offered on the new Z. So we just got to mix this 1 to 1 with the reducer. And as long as Jeremy can lay it down, this is going to look super good. Scrape the bottom and the sides. Got it?
Start in the engine bay with a touch-up gun to make sure I cover all the hard-to-reach areas. I'm using a different style to me while I'm painting, and painting each panel individually, keeping in mind where I start and stop. This is a little different than painting the entire side of the car in one fell swoop, but either way works. Just choose the style that best fits the project and your preference. Alright guys, we have our base color down. Now it's time to move on to some clear. Not only is this going to make the car look really shiny and wet, it's also going to give us some UV protection as well. Spraying the clear can be a little bit tricky. Just make sure you follow the correct overlap and don't leave any dry sprayed areas. You want to make sure it looks like glass when you're done. So take your time, move slowly, and lay it down wet. You know, Jimmy, this is the slickest paint job I've ever laid down, and what better car to put it on?
Yeah, you did a heck of a job, and just wait till we cut and buff this thing. It's going to look even better. And it matches the new Z, so we can't ask for much more.
We should get a couple big gulps.
Well, see you later.